Good morning, Cozy Croissant team. We're here to present the executive briefing for Team 13's penetration test. So we'd like to start with a short introduction before jumping right into our findings. I'm Yasmin, this is Mav, Glenn, Ben, Cooper, and Eli. So let's start with a quick overview of the presentation. Sorry. Like that. Alrighty, so we're going to start with a quick explanation of the scope of our pen test, and then we'll spend most of the time going over what we found during the engagement, as well as the remediation recommendations that we would like to recommend for the systemic issues within your system. So, as we discussed before, we assessed the security posture of TCC's corporate network as well as its guest network. And this includes systems such as the hotel reservation system, the reward system, employee workstations, as well as guest kiosks.
Now let's talk about the results of our penetration test. Each of our findings was given a comprehensive risk score between 1 and 10, taking into account 5 factors. These factors are the severity of the vulnerability, the ease of exposure, the degree of exposure, ease of exploitation, the business impact, and lastly, the effort to fix. Over the course of our engagement, we found 33 findings. Of these, 4 are critical and 8 were high severity. So what does this mean for TCC's security posture? I'll begin by saying we've already seen huge improvement. From our previous engagement, over 40% of the findings have been fixed and updated.
The first finding we'd like to discuss involves unencrypted password storage and exposure. In a digital enterprise like TCC's, passwords are the keys to the kingdom, controlling access and permissions across the IT infrastructure. Therefore, it's critically important that passwords are managed securely and kept secret at all times. What we observed in our assessment was systemic exposure of passwords, accessible in places ranging from instructional documents on various computers, to via bugs, misconfigurations, other vulnerabilities, to even in some cases being listed in the employee directory. This is a problem because that makes it quite simple for malicious actors to obtain a password and therefore obtain access, and at times quite privileged access, to TCC's IT infrastructure. With this access, grave harm can be caused to the business because with most of the IT infrastructure's credentials, one can steal customer PII, steal customer financial information, alter records, or even destroy systems in play. Fortunately, this risk can be greatly tapered with a few simple policies and practices that we'll be discussing shortly.
Another critical vulnerability that we discovered throughout the corporate domain was the use of weak or easily guessable database credentials. We noticed on multiple databases that are used for business critical systems, including both the payment and reservation systems, there were passwords that an attacker could easily guess, and by doing so would be provided access to a treasure trove of guest personally identifiable information that included sensitive info such as credit card numbers and CVVs, phone numbers, home addresses, and emails. The third critical vulnerability we wanted to highlight in this presentation was that the guest kiosks can grant trivial access to the corporate domain. So basically, if an attacker is given access to a guest kiosk, they can perform a kiosk escape and then easily pivot into the corporate domain. Additionally, if an attacker is simply on the guest network, they can very easily log in remotely to the underlying host of the guest kiosks because there is a lack of password authentication for those logins. By doing so, attackers can directly access and attack the internal systems of the corporate domain despite the newly implemented network segmentation.
Thank you, Ben. So, these problems may seem scary, so we decided to emphasize 3 key remediations that we believe can help elevate TCC security. First is an expansion as an expansion of the enforcement of strong password policies. Since our last penetration test, we observe a substantial improvement in the quality and complexity of employee passwords, and that is something to celebrate. But, as Ben mentioned, our team was also able to gain access to business-critical systems and high-risk data by exploiting weak passwords in systems. We recommend improving credential hygiene by increasing the complexity of passwords used in systems, storing passwords securely, and implementing multi-factor authentication. Second, our team recommends adopting a policy of least privileges. Users and services should have the minimum level of authentication required to perform the legitimate business functions that they need to do, and nothing more. This high-level concept can be applied across TCC, both to users and to systems, to help protect TCC in layers. Finally, following up on our team's social engineering campaign against TCC employees, we recommend adopting social engineering training so that to teach employees how to recognize the signs and motives of social engineering campaigns so they can be best fit to become allies, empowered to protect the Cozy Croissant.
Thank you, Cooper. An important part of our testing methodology is taking each of our findings and mapping them where possible to security standards such as the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS. We believe that doing so can help you take measures to protect the Cozy Croissant from both regulatory and reputational risks. We also think that utilizing our suggestions and these guidelines will enable you to manage the residual risks that emerge when you implement secure systems. Doing so can help you focus on doing what you do best, putting heads in beds. Some of the requirements that we marked while conducting this test include the need to change default passwords and configuration files, the need to apply patching and vendor-recommended security measures like antivirus, and lastly, the use of multi-factor authentication to protect customer data and employee information in the event that a password is leaked. Also, during the course of our reporting, we observed many strengths that have been implemented since our last test. This includes the use of up-to-date web services and database servers, the use of lockout policies on sensitive hosts, the employment of network segmentation and external firewalls to keep attackers like us out of the corporate network, and the use of activity logging throughout.
While some of this presentation may seem pretty scary, TCC's security posture is actually pretty comparable to its industry peers. With continued diligence like this by TCC's IT team, we expect that TCC could become a national example of security and compliance done right. So, on that note, we'd like to thank TCC wholeheartedly for its cooperation during this engagement. We couldn't have done it without you. And now we would like to take your questions.
Yes, thank you all very much. Very nice. Do you believe that if we move to the cloud, we could solve most of these problems?
Thanks. A move to the cloud may help you gain some more control and oversight over certain systems, but the act of migration from an on-premises corporate network like the one you have to the cloud also involves some of its own risks, and the necessity to apply some of the suggestions that we've recommended and the requirements of PCI DSS don't automatically go away when you move to the cloud, in my opinion. I believe that when you move to the cloud, you have to be conscious of things such as password policies, the implementation of multi-factor authentication, change management, and of course, budgeting. In many cases, while an on-premises network may not give you the assurances of patching that you might have on a cloud server, you will have to consider cost management when moving to the cloud.
Thank you.
Welcome.
One question about the recommendation, because you made some detailed recommendation about password, about antivirus and so on. Do you have an idea of the efforts that CCC will have to implement to do that? Is it something that can be done in the course of a normal team, or do we need to have a dedicated project for that?
So a lot of the improvements we recommended can be done with the current people and systems currently in place. So one thing we recommend doing is and something by our regular IT team is moving passwords out of systems as much as possible, out of plain text file out of the system, upgrade